Hi everyone, I'm Laura Lico, formerly Richard Lico, and I'm an animator in the gaming industry now for 26 years. And if you're noticing I don't look very Rick-like, yeah, welcome to my new reality. I wanted to reintroduce myself after having the last year, up to 2 years, out of the limelight. It's because I've been really busy living life. So back in 2024, my egg cracked, which is when I figured out that I'm transgendered. Not an easy thing to figure out at the age of 49. But, sometimes we don't get to choose what life throws at us. Because this is not something that we choose. Anyone who's transgendered will tell you that realizing it is just understanding your identity. It's not something that we create. It's not like a desire. It's something that is within us. It's genuinely who we are. So those of us who realize, it's just us having the courage to admit to ourselves what's actually happening. Because no one would choose to risk a marriage, to risk losing their children, to risk social isolation, to deal with hatred from people, to not feel safe just walking down the street, being stared at in the supermarket, having to take medication, for the rest of my life, stabbing myself in the leg weekly with a needle, possibly having surgeries that will risk my life. Nobody chooses this stuff. Like, this is not, it's not something that's easy, and it's not something that's appealing. I don't want to have to go be judged by society or a doctor or, I don't know. It's just, I can honestly say that this is genuinely who I am. And those costs that I mentioned, I've just decided that I'm going to be brave enough to face them. And that's the only real decision I've made in this whole process. It's finding out who I am, finally, and then deciding what to do about that. So where did this come from? There are lots of transgender people who have known their entire lives, from an early age on, that they didn't feel right, they felt like they were of the other gender, and then when they transitioned, it was, oh, a deep breath, finally I'm there. For me, it's not been that. And honestly, for a lot of us, it hasn't been that way. Sometimes we just feel wrong, we don't feel ourselves, but we just don't understand why. And then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, which is what happened with me, you realize it. You're carried away by this flood of emotion, this flood of need, and you're faced with a choice of, do you confront it or do you hide it? And for me, knowing how much struggle I would be in for, I just decided to face it. And so I'm here today. And this is me facing it. A little bit of my history. When I was really young, my parents would say, "Oh, you're a good boy. You're going to grow up to be a good man. Here's some sporting equipment. Here's all these male encoded activities, and you're going to grow up to be a plumber, a man's man. This will put hair on your chest. Eat some liverwurst or whatever it is they're trying to feed me." Um, I don't know who else had that experience. My dad was a weirdo. Loved him. Weirdo, though. So I had to adapt to that because I was a child of the 70s, and then I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So in the 80s and the 90s, the only language we had for trans people came from The Crying Game and Ace Ventura. Not shining examples of acceptance. It was often maligned as a mental illness, worthy of mockery, social pariah, like just the worst of the worst, right? That's the way it was framed socially during that time frame. And it's truly unfortunate, but, as an impressionable person growing up, this is what was taught to me in that time frame, right? So I didn't have language for it. All I knew was that I didn't feel like the person I was being told to be. I just couldn't get into all the things that most guys were into. I threw myself at my artwork. Like in high school, I was a school artist. I mean, that was what I was known for. I threw myself into video games because it was an escape from not feeling at home in my own body. I tried having friendships, and I had a few good ones when I was younger, but I really struggled with friendships because I wasn't inside me. I never felt right. I never felt comfortable. I didn't understand myself. And growing up in New Jersey, not the most accepting place on the planet, at least back then. I don't know what it's like now. I haven't lived there in a long time, but all I know is that, when your 80s and 90s classmates in New Jersey smell blood in the water, a little, this person's a little different than the rest, it gets acted on. So my high school time was pretty difficult. And it made it harder. Like, I always felt like I should be this. I should be this man. I should be into these things. I should be thinking this way. I should be talking about women in a certain way. I should be seeking these interactions and, embracing this version of masculinity that's being broadcast socially as a form of acceptance. And I never fit the shoulds. And the shoulds are just a lie that you use to tell yourself that you're wrong. And I told myself I was wrong for so long. I convinced myself. So video games, art, that was my escape. That was where I can be me. And then college came, and I was able to get out of New Jersey and try and reinvent myself. But it was hard because I still didn't know who I was. So what I did was I discovered animation. Toy Story came out. Really, really resonated with me. I also noticed that the gaming industry was going from 2D to 3D, so I was going to go into that. Anyway, long story short, it turned out I was pretty good at animation. That became my new outlet for my identity. So every game that I worked on, every project, every animation I made, that was my opportunity to kind of just let me be me. It was hard to hold relationships. It was hard to be present. But it was easy to invest all of my time, my effort, and my thought into animation and into the games that I made. So even though I'd work like 10 to 14-hour days, when I wasn't working, I was thinking about it. I was inventing new workflows in my own head that I'd try out the next day and building this frictionless outlet for my existence. Because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't exist. Which is sad. It really is. It's like, who lives their life just to make stuff and that's their only version of existence because there is nothing inside them that feels comfortable to them. That's really sad. I look back at that and I'm just like, oh my God, I so regret that. I wish things could have been different, but that's the way they were. And the benefit of that is I got really good at animation because that's all I did. That was the way I saw the world, and that was the way I experienced life. Now, normal people would go do animation because it's a creative outlet and it pays. So you make money while doing something that you enjoy. They don't validate their existence with animation the way I did. So because of that, I focused on it intently more than your average person who was going out and enjoying their lives, going to concerts, building relationships, all these things that I really struggled to do, that I wanted to do, but I never understood why I couldn't do it right, and I just kept spinning my wheels. And then I joined my friends at Polyarc, and we created the studio, and it kind of kicked that into overdrive. So when I started working on Moss, the animations weren't just about the creative outlet anymore and feeling myself with some, staff ability in Destiny or, a killing move in Condemned or, a jump set for Halo or whatever it happens to be. I got to really take the person who I felt like on the inside, a woman, and inject it into this female mouse. And for the first game on Moss, it was only me doing all the rigging and animation for it. And I was in heaven because I could work 16-hour days and just be at peace, just be myself, like, for so long. And it felt so good. And then Moss 2 came around and we got other animators. And that created a problem because the company saw what I was doing as animation, but I knew what I was doing was validating my existence. So I had a very specific way that I wanted the animation to be, who Quill was, and other people were starting to jump into that space with me. Like, we hired a writer to try and help out with some of the writing on who Quill was when I had already defined her in Moss 1, and in my head it was me. And we had other animators jumping in to help out, and since it was just like a job for them where they'd contribute by making movements and submitting them to the game, and not really understanding Quill as a character, as a person, as me, there was always this misalignment because they were making animations while I was affirming my own life. And then the studio would see the difference in the results. It wasn't fair to anyone, and I created that scenario because I had no idea that I was doing this to the studio, to myself, to the people I worked with. Like, I had no idea. So I quit. I knew I was doing something. And I knew that the studio was reacting, and I knew that it was getting harder and harder. And I also knew that I wasn't able to really validate my existence anymore because of the fact that we were going to move on from the Moss franchise and try something new, and I just wasn't there anymore. That crutch I used to feel my own identity was gone. I'm sorry. On top of this, when I was leaving Polyarch, my mom and I, we had a very complex relationship. She, all my life, struggled from narcissism and mental health problems, right? She and I, we had a very strained relationship. She saw me as a male in her life that was kind of a caretaker. So whenever she wasn't in a relationship with a boyfriend, a husband, or whatever, she tore through those people so quickly. I became the de facto emotional and financial supporter for her, the man in her life. And she was pretty open about this. So I was unable to really explore anything other than that identity I needed to keep my mom going. My mom was prone to suicide attempts. So if I wasn't in that role, it would likely disrupt what fragile existence she had. So I wasn't safe. But around the time I left Polyarch, I had it with her. So I started to really cut ties and draw away from that relationship because I needed to focus on my own mental health. I didn't have my crutch anymore, my outlet for identity. And I just couldn't shoulder that weight of having her anymore, pull me down. And this created an opportunity where I was safe and I was forced to reconcile with my own identity. And over the course of 2024, I did a lot of soul searching. And I started working on a game idea that would again become my next crutch. And it was an absolutely obvious analogy for being trans. In the moment, I couldn't see it. I really couldn't. I started a game studio named Caranimus, and towards the end of the year, brought on my partner Alejandra. And in November of 2024, after we had started working on the game, I realized that that's what the game was about. My egg cracked, and I realized what I was. And let me tell you, when that egg cracks, and you've got 49 years of being in the wrong identity, and all that emotion just floods you, tears you up, pulls you forward in a way that's undeniable, in a way that you just can't hold back. And I was terrified because I couldn't not get pulled forward by the current, but I couldn't move forward knowing what was going to happen, knowing that I might lose my wife, I might lose my kids, I might lose my career, I might lose my life, and I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. So one day, right before GDC, in the middle of crunching like mad to get our prototype ready for GDC, I had an unholy mental breakdown. Had some really bad thoughts. And my wife and I talked about it, and we decided that I needed to move forward and I needed to face this head on, have the courage. So I went to GDC and pitched the game as Laura, but obviously I wasn't out yet. I was still being called Rick. I was still introducing myself as Rick. But in my head, I had accepted who I was. And Ollie and I, we did really well. We walked away from GDC with a lot of interest in our prototype and our concept. And I attribute that to finally feeling like I was in my own skin. So when I'd go out to dinner with people or when I'd go out and have these meetings and stuff, I was actually present for the first time in my life. And I was able to confidently be in that room. And I realized that this was so right and it had to be real. So a few months later, I started HRT, hormone therapy. It matched the brain chemistry that I already had in my head. And it helped me really feel like I was finally present in my own body in a way that I'd never felt before. All of a sudden, the world was filled with color and sound and smell and light. And I felt alive, truly alive for the first time ever, really. And it was just amazing. And then I heard that my mom died. This is now July of 2025. Turns out she had been dead for a few months. I don't know how long. 3 months, 2 months, I don't know. She was last seen in early April. So I'm assuming sometime late April she passed. But she didn't have friends. She didn't have family. She was not a person that was able to foster relationships. She died alone. And I wasn't there. I had to go back to Georgia to take care of her affairs in August. Meanwhile, we had this investor that we were working with at Cranimus. I had my transition going, and here I am going across the country, well into my treatment, feeling pretty good inside, but not really showing much on the outside yet, still going out in the world as Rick. And when I got back, I just couldn't take it anymore. I switched over to Laura. The investor fled. I'd like to say it wasn't because of my gender transition, but I don't know. I understand that I was a risk. I was a risk because I was dealing with so much instability in my life at that point that it was hard for me to focus on the game. So I took the rest of the year off. I got back in August, immediately switched over to Laura, and just decided to live my life and be me, without any expectations, without any responsibilities, without being really out much on social media other than a few posts here and there. I took time for me for the first time in my life. And that brings us to now. So, yeah, this is a dramatic story, and I'm sorry if it was so tear-jerky. I'm a jerk. But now I've got to decide what I want to do. Since I was an animator previously, as a way to satisfy my genuine identity, now I'm left with wondering what animation means to me and where it fits in my life. Now, I do know I need to eventually make an income. Those are nice to have, especially when the mortgage is due. Insurance is also a wonderful thing. I miss it. But I really need to figure out if animation is where my head is at anymore, because creatively, I'm excited about it. I have this wealth of knowledge that I got from a very unhealthy focus on animation as the only thing that really satisfied my identity. And I don't want to let that go. But now I got to figure out where I go from here, because I don't know yet. So I'm going to spend some time working on my character for this Cranimus game. I'm no longer going to hold it back for potential publishers or investors. I'm going to be bringing it to you as I work on it. Maybe it'll create a new spark for me, a new reason to love animation again. Because that's what I want. I want to love animation again, and I want to do it as me. I know this was a long one. I get it. If my choice to accept who I am bothers you in any way, feel free to unsubscribe. I understand. I really do. because growing up in the time I grew up, I know how social stigmas can get stuck in our brains. For the rest of you, if you want to see cool animations, I'm going to be showing a lot more now, I hope. And if you want to support somebody in the LGBTQ plus community, give me a subscribe and a like. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful new year. And yeah, here's to a crazy 2026. Bye.